Hello and welcome to the Astrocast, the third in our series of special where we tell Wilko what's what, hammer, what. Sorry, I'm quite tired. We've been doing this for quite a few hours now.
And we're free for free.
We are free for free. So let's just power through this and get it done. So this is everything else that's you've got questions for within the broader Games Workshop sphere.
Yeah, I don't know if you want to maybe lead. I put a list of points. They may not necessarily be in a good order, and you might want to group them differently. But this is kind of like stuff that I have been aware of.
That's fine. So Warhammer Community and Warhammer TV, they're kind of very much the same thing. It's Games Workshop's attempt to be better at doing social media and engaging with their fan base. Warhammer Community has articles coming out at least one a day during the week on a variety of topics from hobby to new releases and rules. And they have really good content on there. It's done frequently. And they also have a number of stuff like basic list builders. I will say that very basic list builders on there as well.
I mean, back when I very first got into the hobby, I didn't have internet at home. It's a very different world, obviously. So I would go and stay after school and print off like reams and reams of blog articles about how to make terrain and stuff like this. And like you would buy a White Dwarf to get painting guides from the Heavy Metal team and stuff like that. You would buy. I at one point had the How to Paint Citadel miniatures book and stuff like that as well. But the sheer amount of stuff I found, like the fact there's a whole Citadel color website with loads of tutorials is amazing.
There's an
app. To me, there's an app. Okay, well I'm downloading that afterwards. And the other thing I found very impressive was the other day I was like, I'm Brad, you were in the conversation. I was like, I've got some Necrons to build from the Indomitus box. Do I want Gauss Flares or do I want Gauss Reapers? Unsure. Maybe I'll just do 10 of each. And I have decided to go with 10 of each anyway, because that gives me more flexibility. But I searched for the question as well, and the first hit was a page, and I started reading it. It says, here's the different rules and here's how they compare. It was a really nice comparison and talks about why you might want to favor one over the other. And it was only when I finished reading that article, I realized it was a Warhammer community post and not some blog on the internet. And that's quite impressive to me.
Yeah, Games Workshop the Warhammer community team realized that this content is going to be out there anyway, one way or the other. They may as well do it properly themselves. The old adage of the lecturer who once said, I'm going to teach you how to use Wikipedia because much like sex, you're going to do it, so let's teach you how to do it properly and safely. So Games Workshop basically got ahead of the curve and went, okay, cool, we can make this content and we can put it out there and then people do it our way.
Yeah, no, and it makes a lot of sense. And I'm surprised it took them so long to realize that, because I was essentially out of the hobby before they decided this.
See, this is it. It's that big management change we got in around 2015 with the new CEO. Massively changed. It was a bit of a top-down restructure of how they do stuff. And that's also when we get Warhammer TV, which is, I believe it still falls under the Warhammer community umbrella. And they put regular how to paint videos. They're really useful. I mean, the amount of times I've kind of gone, how do I do this? I've gone to a Warhammer TV article because they just give the nice, easy to follow tutorials. It's not like with the old White Dwarf heavy metal ones, which was kind of like, do this, then this, then this. Then suddenly you have a Golden Demon entry, which they always it's just like, okay, I get that step. What? How? Whereas this, they show you, you've got a video, you can watch them doing it and you can follow along. And there is so much wealth to actually get into the hobby and learn the techniques. What is a dry brush? What is a wash? What is a highlight? Not that I really highlight, but so that is such a good one. And I think related to this, I should really bring in the concept of Warhammer Plus, which is their new service launching in August, which is a paid platform. It's not that expensive. It's $4.99 a month.
$49
and with
for
that,
a year, which is good.
Yeah. So you get a free mini, which is cool. They're doing some of their own bespoke shows. The Citadel Masterclass for painters is they're going to keep all the basic and like technical stuff, like what is this, the entry level stuff, that's going to stay on the Warhammer YouTube channel and be accessible. But the Masterclass is like, okay, these are the more advanced techniques that if you want to go that extra level, you want to one day enter Golden Demon, these are the techniques you need to know. And that could be a very, for someone who wants to improve their painting, fantastic. They're also doing battle reports and lore and all sorts of stuff. They are also doing their own in-house animations, in-house in inverted commas.
I'd seen a link on the website about that, and I was intrigued, but I didn't read any more.
So the other thing they're doing is they've basically brought in-house a load of fan content. So the big one was Astartes, which came out last year, and that was a one guy who did a they were only 5 minutes each, but this Space Marine fan series, and it's just insane. The quality is ridiculous. They're sadly no longer on YouTube because they're going Warhammer Plus.
Because that filtered through to me, and I'd seen that on YouTube. And this is pre me getting back into things. So that's how much of how good a piece of work it was that it came through to me as someone who'd kind of fallen out with the hobby entirely.
There's some very cool shows coming through the Warhammer animations. There's Angels of Death, which is about the Blood Angels. There's some cartoons based around all sorts of stuff. It's one that's I was very hesitant, and Theff knows this because me and him have had quite a few conversations about whether Warhammer Plus is actually going to be worth it. And I think we're now at the point where we go, actually, for what you're paying, you get a hell of a lot. And the subscriber models, especially the Vindicar, I mean, Wilko, look at the Vindicar model. It's insane.
I'll link you after this. It's amazing.
Yeah, the one that you get for, in inverted commas, free. So that's kind of the TV and community article. I suppose related to that is the sheer amount of fan content. YouTube, certainly within the Warhammer YouTube community, has exploded with so many good channels. We mention them frequently, but Snipe and Wib are fantastic. They do a lot of kind of rules covering, but from a slightly different perspective. Their Codex Compliance series, which is what they do the most, it's probably their most recognizable. They review old rule books, and they are fantastic. They're well worth a watch. You've also got people like Tactica Imperius, who doesn't do as much now. He's back as a teacher. 40k Theories does theory videos around the lore. I'm a massive fan of Oculus Imperium, who does lore from an in-universe perspective as though he's an Imperial historiator. And he is so good as coming across as an arrogant arsehole. It's brilliant. You believe he is an Imperial historiator. You've also got I think this Voldemort is quite renowned, and there's a whole list of very good YouTubers, and there's a great community. You've also got people like Chapter Master Valrak, who does more hype videos and just general content, like general coverage, and Kirioth, who does very similar stuff, but maybe slightly less hype.
Kirioth is very accessible. He's like the everyman guy. And every time I'm watching one of his videos, my wife says, "Why is Brad on the TV?" Which gives me a good laugh. Yeah, sorry, go on.
And then you've got, I'd say, I'll mention Outer Circle. I go backwards and forwards on whether I like him or not. He is the kind of opposite to Valak. He's very cynical, not necessarily unjustified, very hypercritical. Also, more of a Horus Heresy players who've kind of been messed around with a lot recently. So you've also got fantastic communities on Twitter and Instagram, Facebook. Most Facebook groups are terrible, and I'm not saying that all of the 40k ones are brilliant, because several of them are absolute fucking nightmares.
But I mean, you've added me to a very nice 20-person group of friends, and I'm in an Old Hammer group with you and stuff like that. I think the thing Facebook communities have always done well, and we don't want to go on a big tech rant here, but is when they're small and they're your mates.
Yes.
Like, they always worked pretty well until they started messing with the algorithm.
There's a reason we founded it is an exclusive group. Well, it is. I said it's private for a reason.
Yeah, it's an exclusive group, as though it's people we play games with. One day we might have an Astrocast Facebook group, but which will be open and people can join. But is very much it's the people we play with. That sounded bad. I should just press on. You've also got Reddit. There's some great communities on Reddit. There's a subreddit for everything on Reddit. So, the Warhammer ones are great. we'll then jump into the kind of the painting stuff that's kind of related.
I've read up a bit on this now, so I could maybe ask slightly more questions about, like, more pointed questions, I suppose. So I the other day, I have a big box. It's the old Eldar 3rd edition box that keeps my paints. And I went through it and I found all the ones that were beyond repair and I threw them away. And I asked Brad for a nice chart that compared all the different paints across editions because they've all been renamed. Like Dark Angels Green is now a contrast paint and not like the base color you paint your Dark Angels. So things like that slightly confused me. So I went and had a look, worked it all out and went, okay, cool. I've got this nice chart that compares the old versions to the new. And I went into the store. I dropped 50 quid on paint. Which is not hard to do, but so this is before I'd even bought any models. I was just starting to paint through some separate models I have. I have a really nice dragon miniature I've been working on, some terrain stuff, but I knew in the back of my mind I was about to buy the Indomitus box if I saw it cheap. So it was an intentional purchase ahead of that. But I went in and I bought stuff and I kind of went, oh, I know I want this, and this, and I knew some were layers and bases. I remember that change, and then I think I ended up getting, is it Rune Lord brass, which might be one of, and I think some of the washes that are now in the big tubs. Basically, things had changed, and I was like, I have a list of everything I think I need. I resurrected some of my old paints, so I still fortunately have things like Vomit Brown that, you know, I can use for doing like terrain stuff and things, or Tau, I guess. But I went through all that stuff. I resurrected some of the paints by adding water back into them and bringing them back to life. I even have some in the old, you know, the really awful screw top GW ones that dry out really quickly.
Oh God.
So I managed to save some of those even. So I have all these paints, but I'm aware there's now contrast paints and technical paints, and I've read up a bit on them, so I get what the basic idea behind contrast paints. But I think the thing I maybe wanted to ask about more with contrast paints is you now find that all of their stuff is suggesting like there's traditional painting and contrast painting. And I suppose my question is more like contrast painting seems like the easy access to painting to make people's general standard of armies easier to get to that general standard of an army. I don't know if it goes to the higher level as much.
So yeah, I think your assumption is correct. Yeah, contrast paint allows you to get to a good. So you've also mentioned about battle ready and parade ready. What they've kind of done.
Yeah, that seems like a renaming, and I asked that because I just wanted to be clear on it.
So you remember the old 3 color minimum?
Yes.
That is basically battle ready. That is like basic base coats. You know, you've got your blue for your Ultramarines. You've got just Macragge blue, Retributor armor, Bolt gun metal, Abaddon black. You're done. That's your battle ready. Parade ready is you're doing washes and highlights on top of that. Contrast, both me and Theff are big advocates for contrast. It does, for me, you get a good quality, a good tabletop standard very quickly. There is limits to contrast. So I would say I'm a contrast plus painter. So I do stuff like, I don't do metallics with contrast because they all look terrible. There's sometimes I will use a mix. There's a great video they've just done on how to paint Stormcast that uses both contrast and more traditional base wash highlight methods, and that's probably the way I'm going to go with that. So that's kind of what contrast is. I quite like it, and it is slowly helping me get through my backlog. I think contrast is a good base coat for everything. Just because it gets you that high-low definition in one coat, and then you can then build up onto it. Now, the one bit that made me maybe not appreciate contrast is, so I painted some word bearers using Duncan Rhodes' scheme for word bearers, which is you base coat them with lead belcher. You then go all over with the Basilicanum grey contrast paint, and that dumbs them down to a really dark gunmetal, and then you fill in the panels with Flesh Tearers red, which is another contrast paint. And Dark Mouse, when I showed him my test model, he went, "Oh, you've done some really nice highlights on that." And there were no highlights on the model; it was all with contrast. And I don't know how much contrast Dark Mouse uses, because I would say of our group, Dark Mouse is the best painter.
Yes.
I don't think anyone's going to take offence by that. So for him to say that, I went, oh, okay, I'm quite happy. I was really happy with the word bearers I've got in my scheme. So that kind of, it was a nice, they are a really useful tool in your toolbox, and they're good for, I've got a lot of models that I need to get painted. That's what they're really good for. If you want to go beyond the next level, and you want to start doing more like, as they say, parade level and the kind of more advanced paint schemes, they are a good tool to get you there, but they'll only take you so far. They are also, some colours work better than others. As a rule, the darker colours work better than the light. that's not universal, but that's my. I don't know if Theff would disagree on that or not.
I would say no. You're right there. The contrast, ironically, the contrast between light and dark is very, very obvious when it comes to things like the Black Templar and Dark Angel's Green, that kind of thing. So when you're doing black, contrast paint is fantastic because it gives you that really nice, clean set of highlights in the black. And then as you get brighter, like Apothecary White, the white contrast paint, I really wanted it to work, so my Tau have white armor, and it's a nightmare to paint white armor, especially on 3,000 plus points of Tau, but it isn't as good, unfortunately.
It's got its uses, but it's not as good.
But yeah, in general, I very much agree.
So as of today, I own a single contrast paint, which is Dark Angel's
Excellent.
Green, because I was like, I have an idea for doing Necron eyes by painting them silver underneath, then doing like green and maybe doing a dot highlight over the top.
That works really well.
It's a chance to play. Having had a quick look at like Necron paint schemes and stuff, it seems like that's the kind of thing it could be useful for my style of painting. But I'm coming very much. I wanted to check before I start painting everything traditionally that I wasn't missing out on something massive by doing contrast stuff. I'm happy to continue painting traditionally and maybe add it as a tool as opposed to just
I think it's quite good for glowy effects as well. That works quite well. If you kind of do rather than using grey sear, if you do a white undercoat, a white coat below, it can give you quite a nice like screen glow or lenses. Like all my lenses are done with white scar and then the colour on top because it just it gives them a slight glowy effect.
Yeah, Ethermatic Blue is an amazing colour for this because it just gives that blue glow perfectly, especially if done over Corax White.
Technical, so that is the most obvious ones are the texture paints. They fall under the technical, I believe.
I had a look at these and I would say that all of the texture paints are just, I would not say cash grab, that's the wrong term, but these are things that other people had methods for before and now Games Workshop just sell their own version of it, right? Which is great for people who don't buy modelling stuff elsewhere, but you can walk into any art store and get an equivalent thing in a massive tub for less money, would be my understanding of how those work. It may not have the specific pigments in that they have, but if you're going to, the kind of stuff, I've seen some interesting stuff with like weathering using technical paints, but if I was doing, like, my main idea for those kind of textured ones is to use them for basing, in which case I don't care what colour they are, I'm going to paint them over the top of them anyway. I normally
put them down, then spray over the top anyway, so yeah.
There's 3 technical paints that I think are worth mentioning, and that is Tesseract Glow, Nighthaunt Gloom, and Hexray Flame. Because they're not contrast paints, but they're almost they're because they're a bit thinner, and they're very good for glowing effects. I love Hexray Flame for like green fire, unsurprisingly, and I've used the Tesseract Glow, which they basically released so you could do your Necron glowy guns. I've been using that quite a lot for screens, like Auspexes, and also snipe, my Space Marine Scouts, like night vision goggles, just because it gives that kind of nice night vision goggle effect. So those are 3 I'd say are worth looking into for the technical paints.
I was just going to add a couple to that list. Nihilak Oxide, which is one of my favourite paints ever, for doing verdigris effects on metal. Really nice weathering effect because it just pulls in the recesses, but it keeps its glow. And Riser Rust, which is just fantastic for rust effects. It really does the job.
So I saw on, talking about Warhammer TV, I watched a few of the kind of videos they had, and I saw one to do Eldar Gems using one of the paints. Brad mentioned the red one. And I also saw, the verdigris and the rust videos, and I was like, yes, this intrigues me as a way to do an effect that would be a lot harder in a traditional method, or I'd have to mix my own paint, basically. So those definitely jump out as me as things I would happily add to my like list of skills. And I've got to get back into painting. It's been a while. Like, I'm not going to be magically amazing straight away. So yeah, those do sound cool. My final question, and I appreciate this is probably a very broad point, and I just need kind of, I want maybe a potted summary here. So back in the day, there were specialist games, and I would have probably covered Blood Bowl in that. I don't know if it technically was, but things like BFG and stuff like that. And a lot of them disappeared. And I remember being a bit sad about that. In fact, Brad now owns a fair amount of BFG that I had picked up at some point. Which, like, I loved games like that, which were kind of these boxed games where you could just grab a few things and go play a completely different game. And once you had like a set of it, you didn't really need to buy any more stuff, which was quite nice. And I know there's been a re-release of Space Hulk, which is a board game technically, but still has minis. I kind of wanted, like, since that all mostly seemed to disappear as I was leaving the hobby, is that back? You mentioned Horus Heresy and things like that as we were talking, and the possibility of whatever the replacement for Warhammer is.
They all fall under the heading of what's called boxed games, and they are slowly bringing them back. So Blood Bowl came back first, I believe, and that is now on its second. I've not played it, but it clearly is doing well because you're getting all sorts of stuff being released for it. They then re-released Necromunda, and the new Necromunda stuff is fantastic. All of the gangs have a plastic box. Some of them now have a second plastic box as well. And the new Necromunda rules are also really good. They went quite hard into skirmish games. So there is Kill Team for Warhammer 40,000, which will be a big announcement this week for the next version of Kill Team, which is Kill Team uses basically the same as the 8th edition rules, but drop down to a single squad. And you can assign 3 guys as specialists, so they can be like a sniper or a comms or a medic, and you have a leader. And that's a really nice system, and I'm a big fan of Kill Team. And I may own too many Kill Teams at this point. Because what I like with Kill Team is it allows you to scratch a hobby itch. So probably the 2 biggest ones I've done is squats, because I had a load of old squat models, which I've now painted up as a Kill Team, and my 13th company. I will also throw my Retro Marines in there, but that's slowly becoming an army, and I should probably control that urge a bit more. But I have plenty of Space Marines. It's fine. So that kind of all falls in the heading of boxed games. I'll also throw into this stuff like Warhammer Quest, which is their role-playing dungeon board game. Hero Quest, basically. It's not a role-playing game, but it has role-playing elements.
It's a dungeon crawler.
Dungeon crawler, yeah, that's the one.
Can I mention Warcry?
Oh, I don't know. Can you mention Warcry? I think I'll get stabbed if I don't let you mention.
Warcry is so good. It's yeah. No, sorry, I will calm down. But Warcry is basically Warcry is to Age of Sigmar what Kill Team is to 40k, but it is the easiest, most accessible skirmish game I've ever played, and it's such a good gateway drug to get into Age of Sigmar. I'd also say that a lot of these specialist games, the box games, are evolving in their own way. Like, there are people who will never play Age of Sigmar who are so deep into Warcry, it's insane. And same with Kill Team. There are people who will never play 40k who are really deep into Kill Team. Just because Games Workshop have realised that the more they expand these, the more money they can make. So, yeah.
Which was always the thing that confused me, I think. That there was, it's not, I think there was maybe this is all hearsay and guesswork, right? But I feel maybe there was an impression that by having the specialist games, they were pulling people away from the other games. But I think that's rarely the case. And having more stuff for more tastes is always a good thing if you're a company that makes games.
So what they've been quite clever at, especially on the Age of Sigmar front. So there's kind of 2 skirmish games, and I'm sure I'll get told off for calling them both skirmish games, associated with Age of Sigmar. You've got Kill Team, not Kill Team, Warcry, which we've already talked about, and that's quite cool because they've done that. Started off as being very chaos focused, different chaos war bands fighting in somewhere called the All Points, which is a realm between all the different realms that's entirely infested with chaos. And they had a war band from each of the mortal realms except Azir. So they had, what does a chaos cultist from the realm of metal look like? What does a chaos cultist from the realm of beasts look like? And they've all it's different ways of looking at chaos. You've also got the Warhammer Underworlds game, which is more of a, I think I will let Theff explain this one because you played it.
Underworlds is that bastard abomination of the deck building and card collecting of X-Wing with a small number of miniatures played on a hex grid, and it's very fast paced, very kind of 2 players that know what they're doing can get 3 games into an hour, and it's always played to best of 3. You have a small number of pre-ruled, pre-built miniatures. Well, they're all pre-built, but you know what I mean. Like, they're specific. They are those characters. and you throw them at each other until somebody wins. It's a lot of fun, and again, all the warbands in that can be taken as units in Age of Sigmar with their own rules. So like the Idoneth warband now has a place with the crab in my Idoneth army. Because, yes.
What I wanted to bring up with Warcry is they are so creative with the Warcry warbands. They're, as I say, so Idoneth Deepkin are sea elves, basically. I won't go into the full lore of them, but basically they live under the water and they ride sharks. And that is just quite a cool thing. So their warband has a crab and a large fish, just as part of the warband.
Which, if you look at the meme, somebody painted them up as Sebastian and Flounder from The Little Mermaid, and this made me very happy. But yes.
You've also got stuff like Aeronautica Imperialis, which is their take on X-Wing, fighter combat, and Adeptus Titanicus, which is Titan combat, the latest version of it. I have an Aeronautica Imperialis starter set, but I've not done anything more with it. Unleash the crab. Sorry, the crab has just appeared on my screen.
Okay.
I know my brother Matt is very big into Adeptus Titanicus. It's one I would like to get into at some point, but I've just not got around to it. If the warbands are very cool, very creative, they're all individuals, they've all got a story, and in some ways they kind of preview units that haven't been released yet, like the Ossiarch Bone Reapers, who are essentially undead storm. No, it's not. They are Nagash's answer to the Stormcast. They are kind of reforged souls and bone armor. They come with an archer that's not currently a unit you can take within the regular game, but I would imagine we will get a unit of that when they get their new codex. So that's kind of what's happened to specialist games. There's talks about whether they're going to bring more back. Gut is they're going to keep adding specialist games as they kind of complete ranges. I would definitely look at the Necromunda stuff, because some of this, especially Forge World, do a lot of hired guns for Necromunda now. And there is some really creative Necromunda models, including at least 2 legitimate squats, which is good. Squats are back, and that trailer when they dropped was one of the best trailers they've ever done.
Dwarves in space.
Well, there was a meme within the Warhammer community that anytime someone mentioned squats in the comment section, Games Workshop reset the clock. So the trailer was a guy from Warhammer community going, "Hi, Games Workshop, when are you going to bring back the? It's time." And they went off on this arcane and then reset the clock and started laughing, and the clock fell off the wall. And then squats are back. Okay, ass squat. And he is quite a cool little model. I do need to paint my version of Grendel Grendelson at some point. So that is kind of specialist games. They are back. They exist, but not quite as you remember, and more integrated than what they were.
Yeah, they're very intersectional with the main game lines now.
With the exception of Blood Bowl and the stuff that's at a different scale, like Adeptus Titanicus and Aeronautica Imperialis.
I like that it seems like it's more in the fold, because I think, again, trying to be, if 40k was the thing that drew you in the past, and fantasy was like the chess-like adult version of the game, as it were, then specialist games was that thing on the top shelf that you saw occasionally. Except for the big release of Inquisitor, I don't really remember there being much emphasis on them, and there'd be like an article every White Dwarf, maybe on BFG or something. And so it's nice to see them being more involved, because, occasionally want to scratch the hobby itch without spending hundreds and hundreds of pounds on plastic, and maybe just buying one box is enough.
I'm going to go cry now. Yeah. So I bought Cursed City, damn it.
I did as well. I Cursed City has some. I want to know what happened with Cursed City, because there was so much hype for it. It sold out instant. It's got to be something to do with the Suez Crisis or Brexit or the pandemic. And they handled that badly. They should have come out and said, this is what's happened. This is why Cursed City is no longer available. But they didn't. They kind of went back to old Games Workshop of say nothing. But at some point, I will get my Cursed City painted. That might be something painted sooner rather than later, because that kind of gives me a death army with the adversaries. Which again, it's the nice thing with even the box games, so like Blackstone Fortress and Cursed City. The rules for the units are just, you could just take them in normal games. It's actually quite nice now. Cursed City, you used to have to take all the villain, like character models as one big unit. You can now take them separately as of the latest General's Hand. And I am still convinced that Radagar the Beast was supposed to be the final boss of the final expansion, and nothing anyone will say will convince me otherwise. That it's a shame, but they seem to have killed it off. But not a lot we can do. Right, I think with that, it's probably a point to end. Hopefully, you've all enjoyed this series of specials, and if you didn't know what's been going on with the worlds of Warhammer, if you're in a similar position to the good Dr. Wilkinson, you're now a little bit more informed and hopefully a little bit entertained. I'm going to stop waffling now because I need to go to beddy buys.
That's entirely fair. I would just like to add, I hope maybe this can stand there as like we have some specials for unparliamentary language, which are like things that are kind of that they sit there as a thing people can come back to. And hopefully if there are other people like me who have missed out, like obviously some stuff will become out of date, Age of Sigmar is always updating, etc. But I hope that this can be a useful resource for people who might want to get back into the hobby, and you can join me in spending tons of money on plastic.
Yes.
Join us.
Welcome back.
Excellent.
You'll never leave this time.
Yes,
Right.
I think that's
On
probably true.
that note, it's good night from me.
Hotel
And me.
California. And me.
And it's good night from them.
Hey, we made it.